Hey team, I'm Ash Kelly, and you're listening to I Am Madeline, Episode 3. A few days ago, Madeline shared a picture with me. It's a headshot that was taken when she was graduating from theater school, and it's a stunning photo. She's not quite 30 years old, she has this blindingly luminous smile, perfect teeth, perfectly imperfect bold eyebrows, and thick, dark, long hair.
That photograph, for me, is the very epitome of lost promise. I was so excited. I'd finished university. I hit Vancouver. I'd fought my way through another infection, and I was ready to go. I was happy to go.
She was landing roles and winning awards on stage. She had an agent ready to sign a deal promising to launch her into TV and movies. This headshot is like a relic from a life that was almost lived, an alternate universe where she never got sick. And maybe in another timeline she would have made it to Hollywood, the Oscars, the Tonys, Oprah, who knows? Instead, this picture marks a point in Madeline's life where her timelines split. Shortly after it was taken, Madeline got sick with myalgic encephalomyelitis, which sent her deep into poverty and likely an early death. 25 years later, she's sharing this picture with us, with you, because she's confident she won't be recognized. Before she shared it with me, she asked some friends if it looked like the same person they knew today.
And most people gave me a mix of answers, which was no, but it's still you. It's your spirit. This is the face I see when you're talking to me. This is your personality. This is your energy. Someone said, this is your soul. And I had to say, because even I don't know that I think I'm beautiful, but that photograph is pretty cute. Even I have to admit that.
It's not just the intervening decades that have made her look different. Her ME gives her severe edema, a fluid buildup that makes her face and body swell. She jokes that she looks like the rampaging marshmallow monster from Ghostbusters.
I know I'm going to be recognized by some people, and while I am not identifiable in my current state of, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Girl of all the edema, I obviously looked like that like some 24, 25 years ago.
Madeline and I have spoken dozens of times over the last year, but I've only seen her face via Zoom maybe half a dozen times. I've never really seen her eyes as large as they are in this photograph. I've never seen her smile on display so vividly. She knows the photo increases the risk that more people will recognize her. If she's identified, the stress could hurt her health. But she wants you to see her as a person with a story, not just a disembodied voice with a series of sad details of sickness.
And somebody recently said a story needs a face. Now, a face, I can give you a face.
Madeline has modeled her life around a philosophy of kindness and service to others. That's helped her attract a lot of friends along the way.
Madeline, as I say, is vivacious and fun and has a great energy and is a great storyteller.
Liza Rogers met Madeline at a party years ago, after she got sick, but before things got really bad.
She's so artsy and creative, and she's a great listener. I've been to many social gatherings with her over the years, and she's always just a light in the room.
This disease is brutal. It's taken so much of Madeline's life from her. First her acting career, then a lot of friends who didn't understand her illness walked away. And now, just in her mid-50s, she's approaching her assisted death. She's asked a doctor to help her die, not because her illness is untreatable. It is. She knows what to do to make her symptoms bearable. If she keeps receiving treatment regularly, she believes she can live a pretty good life for the foreseeable future. The problem is she can't afford the treatment because it comes from a naturopath, not a medical doctor, and it isn't covered by provincial health care.
I don't want to die. I hate being felt like poverty forces me into this situation. Poverty and a medical system that, is so separated, is so not interlinked with other qualified modes of health.
Madeline does not need to die. I've said it before, and you can't convince me otherwise. She's found a treatment that works for her, but most doctors are not interested in hearing about IV injections of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. With these injections, Madeline is upright, on her feet, spending time with friends and in the community, volunteering and teaching. Without them, she is profoundly exhausted. Every cell in her body is literally suffocating without oxygen. Without treatment, she rates her pain a constant 10 out of 10, and her heart rate becomes chaotic, to the point her heart has nearly stopped beating at times. Madeline first discovered these injections about 20 years ago. It was a long trial and error process because she couldn't afford the tests her naturopath wanted to order. But she wants you to know before we tell you what she's found that what works for one ME patient may harm others. This disease is diverse, and it requires specific targeted treatments and the supervision of medical professionals. There's no silver bullet, but there are also no rigorous treatment guidelines. Madeline had to try a lot of things before she landed on this injectable solution of nutrients known as a Myers cocktail. It didn't work perfectly at first. It did hurt her in very real ways at times, even as it helped with other symptoms. The injections improved her health dramatically, but she couldn't afford to continue. 2 decades later, when her health worsened again, Madeline tried the cocktail one more time, and after some tweaking, she found the right combination. She says it's a delicate balance, but she sees gradual improvement when she gets these shots regularly.
It's like a turtle walking sideways on a hill. It's constantly going to want to tip over. So the treatments and the supplements and supports are like taking a hand and putting it on the back of the turtle so he doesn't tip over. And the more you do them, the more stable the turtle becomes, and the less steep the terrain becomes.
I know some of you will have questions about the differences between naturopathic doctors and medical doctors. It's true, there are some naturopaths out there who push dangerous experimental procedures, like $18,000 poop transplants for autism. A Vancouver naturopath recently got a mere finger wagging from Dr. Bonnie Henry, our top doctor, for doing just that. One reason some people are weary of naturopaths is because some in the profession are known for spreading vaccine misinformation and sowing vaccine hesitancy. But it's also true that we've seen a number of medical doctors come forward as anti-vaxxers themselves. A literature review of articles trying to quantify vaccine hesitancy among all healthcare providers shows the issue is incredibly complex, and we have a lot more to learn about cultural, social, and economic factors behind these ideas. But that will have to wait for a future episode. For now, I want to say naturopathic physicians complete 8 years of post-secondary school at accredited colleges, and they do a number of clinical rotations in the same areas as medical doctors. They are considered primary caregivers and can prescribe drugs and even perform minor surgeries in British Columbia. To get a sense of what scientists think about Madeline's treatments, I asked the top ME/CFS researcher in Canada what he thought about Myers cocktail IV drips or injections. He says there's good reason to believe it could work for some patients.
I can tell you that a lot of vitamins, a lot of compounds that will modify your oxidoreduction inside of your body, like glutathione, will also modulate the response of your microRNAs, for instance, as well as other molecules. So no surprise that some ingredient people or some nutriment people are using, could have some impact.
Dr. Hélène Moreau is a University of Montreal professor and the director of the interdisciplinary Canadian Collaborative Myalgic Encephalomyelitis Research Network, known as ICANN-CME. He says he doesn't blame patients for doing the best they can in a void left by severely lacking research into ME treatments. But amateur experimentation with these is no substitute for controlled scientific research.
The human body is very complex, highly regulated, and we cannot just try in the dark recipe to make sure that improves. But it's important that we try to open the conversation with the patient, say, okay, this is working for me, and then the group say, this is not working for me. Exactly, more or less things. Let's study them.
In her documentary, Unrest, Jennifer Bria captured her own journey in search of something, anything that could alleviate her ME symptoms. It led her to try almost everything she could find recommended online.
When medicine has no answers for you, where do you turn?
I have the cure to motherfucking chronic fatigue.
I cured my chronic fatigue with a high-carb vegan diet in 3 days.
Started eating the good foods, the whole foods.
Balance your chemistry, acid-alkaline balance.
2 dietary supplements that can really, really help.
It's like a space alien.
The lightning process changed my life.
I've been tapping a lot.
I take magnesium every day.
Oh my God. I don't really know what's going on, but something I'm taking, it feels like it's working. Of course, I would never know what it was, because I just added 5 new things and...
Ooh, delicious gastrointestinal support.
Yes!
I feel like I'm Betty Flintstone, you know? Like, this is some crazy prehistoric dinosaur food.
Whoa! But my husband is sort of thinking a little bit about fecal transplants and self-administered hookworm. I think even I have certain lines that I, at least at this point in time, am not quite ready to cross.
Eventually, Bria found moving to a hot, dry climate and obsessively avoiding exposure to mold helped curb her symptoms. And this isn't actually that unusual. Plenty of ME patients find something that works at least a little bit. The problem is the treatments that work wonders for some don't work at all for most. One patient's social media post I spotted the other day explained that his risk tolerance to try experimental treatments was a lot higher earlier in his disease because he didn't understand that every time a potential solution actually hurt him, he was stealing time and energy from his future. He was desperate in the beginning, but he says his acceptance of the disease is what allowed him to stabilize. Some patients get so sick so fast they don't even have time to experiment or consider all the options in front of them. I met a family that lives just a few hours from Madeline on Vancouver Island. Sue told me about her husband, Matt, who was a hardworking ICU nurse, an active outdoor adventurer who loved cycling and hiking before he got sick with ME.
Within a matter of 8 months, he was in a separate bedroom in our home. He had to manage sensory stimuli. He was in pain all the time. We were buying heating pads in double to support his leg pain, etc. And we had family coming in to just be with us and support us.
In the last year, Sue says he's been so exhausted and sensitive to stimuli, she hasn't been able to have a conversation with him, even by text message. We're not using Sue's real name because that could identify her husband, who's unable to consent to his information being shared publicly. They, too, have tried a litany of remedies other ME patients recommended online.
He declined and continued to decline despite understanding the mechanism of pacing, despite trying various vitamins and supplements other people had, despite trying diets, despite trying some other pharmaceutical measures to manage some symptom or pain or sleep.
Even Madeline is the first to say her injections aren't for everyone. She knows they work for her.
It doesn't work for everyone because you're using it on people without understanding how their system is broken, in particular, their energy production system. If you don't understand how it's broken, then you don't understand if this treatment is even appropriate to try for them.
Professor Alain Moreau says Madeline is exactly right. Finding out why some treatments work for some ME patients and not others is at the very core of his work. A recent survey found that about 1/3 of ME patients got better after getting a coronavirus vaccine, but the other 2/3 got worse. Moreau wants to know why. It's a similar story with the drug Ampligen. It's an antiviral that's been around for 20 years and has been shown to vastly improve the lives of some patients, but not others. Recently, the company that makes Ampligen released first-of-its-kind data from an ongoing clinical trial that now includes COVID-19 long haulers. More than half of ME/CFS patients involved reported an improved quality of life and were able to comfortably exert themselves longer after taking the drug. The research also suggests that those who take it earlier in the onset of ME see more improvement. Still, this data tells us little about why half those patients got better and the other half did not. There needs to be more research into drugs like Ampligen, as well as the various remedies patients share online. Moreau says accurate testing for ME/CFS could be a game changer in his research. His team in Montreal has developed such a test that he says is 94% accurate. They put an inflatable sleeve on a patient's arm. It gives them a light massage that would be pleasant for most people, but induces post-exertional malaise in people with ME. A tight-fitting smart vest monitors their vitals in the following days, and blood tests taken before and after the massage can identify microRNA signatures to determine if they have ME/CFS.
MicroRNA can be used to establish a diagnosis and also to develop sometimes a prognosis about the risk of developing a more severe condition or some specific symptoms.
Moreau's test also allows him to study the most severely sick patients because his team can go to them in their homes. Unlike in other studies, bedridden patients who can't walk into a clinic actually make up a lot of his research cohort. And the good news is Moreau's ICANN CME team isn't alone on working on a diagnostic test for ME/CFS. Australian researchers have spent the last few years examining the role of calcium ion receptors that are present on every cell in our body and are known to be connected to sensory perception and heat regulation, and they were just given another round of funding last fall. Stanford University's Genome Technology Lab added salt to blood samples to stimulate stress, and then ran them through a device that measures electrical impedance, basically how energy moves through a cell. The team found measurable differences in the blood of ME patients when comparing it to healthy patients. Another Stanford team is exploring how the byproducts left behind when ME patients do create energy, like nitrogen, may actually be clogging up the system of energy production itself. Moreau also believes the key to making progress on ME/CFS is for researchers to work together. When he gives speeches at conferences, he likes to use an analogy with a cartoon elephant.
ME/CFS, the elephant in the room.
He shows a slide where a handful of researchers, all of them wearing blindfolds, are standing around an elephant. One is grabbing onto the elephant's tail, another onto a big floppy elephant ear. A third scientist feels nothing but a leg. Each thinks they can identify what's in front of them.
The take-home message here is we're not flying blindly.
He says this is the same trap scientists are vulnerable to. If each specialist thinks their discipline holds the key to solving the problem, they won't see ME/CFS for what it really is.
The take-home message is we're covering altogether the elephant.
Madeline has used the exact same metaphor.
Various specialists, even specialists in this field, who want to say, it's this alone, I plant my flag on the moon here, versus understanding that if you stand back from and look at the elephant without a blindfold on, you see that these are all components of the one creature.
ME/CFS is so complex it doesn't fit neatly into a single category.
It's a medically orphan disease.
That's why Moreau says it's foolish for specialists to be claiming the root of the disorder belongs in a single field of practice. Just because it greatly impacts the immune system doesn't mean it's something immunologists can solve on their own. Just because there are neurological symptoms doesn't mean neurologists hold the key. And just because there are genetic components doesn't mean geneticists are going to solve the ME/CFS riddle. Just remember how psychologists tried to claim ME/CFS as their own and labeled patients with hysteria. Such myopia may serve the careers of ambitious doctors and scientists, but not patients. Moreau says we need to not only see the whole elephant, but the different kinds of elephants within the ME/CFS family. Those different presentations of the disorder that vary widely in severity, characteristics, and response to treatment.
So if you keep them in the same bag, there will be no solution. If you wait for the magic bullet that will be work for everyone, that won't happen. Very unlikely, at least.
Many ME/CFS patients abhor being subcategorized within the disease, fearing it may lead to exclusion of some and recognition of others. A lot of that comes from their experiences with these professionals who believe ME is just one thing. But Moreau is creating subcategories in the hopes of including more patients overall by finding, testing, and targeting treatments that work, even if they only work for a small portion of patients. And he's uniquely positioned to lead this research. He has expertise in dentistry, molecular genetics, and musculoskeletal diseases. He's studied scoliosis, osteoarthritis, and osteoporosis before coming to ME.
I'm developing an expertise in MSFS, but not attached to a specific disease or at a specific methods. I don't care about the methods. I don't care about the biomarker. I don't care about the platform.
While a universal cure for ME/CFS is extremely unlikely, Moreau says he's optimistic about the progress that can be made when doctors, researchers, and patients work together to truly see the elephant.
My win and the win of the patient will be, let's go one stone at a time. Let's go one step at a time. Even if sometimes that can be perceived as a baby step, I'm well aware about the notion of time. Okay, and if you're suffering of the disease during 15 years or 20 years, you are losing everything. Time is very precious for you as well as your health.
Madeline wishes that spirit of silo breaking and collaboration would apply to her care providers and the government that regulates and funds them. She's receiving 2 to 3 injections a week and is trying to maintain that as long as she can. Sometimes she reduces the treatments to make her money and her time here stretch. But ultimately, when she does that, she gets much, much worse. Her energy drops like a dead battery. The pain becomes a full-time 10 out of 10, and her heart rate swings violently up and down. If she were to stop completely or reduce the frequency of treatment for too long, it could kill her before she's allowed to go through with her scheduled death next month. All because she can't afford 3 injections a week, the medicine to stabilize her between those treatments, and a few basic accommodations. But these injections aren't just an extra line item she can't fit into her monthly budget. She can't afford the rest of her life, either. Her apartment is only a little bigger than a typical one-car garage. She can only afford the rent because it's subsidized. She has no luxuries to speak of. She's constantly deciding between the most basic necessities. If she buys food, she might not be able to afford medication. This past winter, she found herself in a famously wet Vancouver winter without a waterproof jacket.
Because all my coats are secondhand and none of them are waterproof and I can't get them. I've tried so many different waterproofers and none of them are waterproofing it. So I got it and it called itself water resistant, which apparently means it shouts at the water but doesn't actually hold it out. I don't know. They were clearance and I couldn't really bring them back. And I'm going to actually use the waterproofer on those. Maybe it'll work on those. But at least I wasn't as wet. So that's something, I guess. I was thinking like being constantly drenched on rainy days during COVID-19 when you have an immune deficiency seems like a really stupid idea. But now I'm thinking, did you waste money?
Madeline was forced to try to decide whether buying a jacket in the winter was worth it because her income is so low. Just over $1,000 a month in one of the most expensive cities in the world. That's all the government gives to people like Madeline who can't work due to a disability. And that's $175 more than she was allotted before the pandemic, which pushed the BC government to provide a sort of emergency top-up. Still, she's getting about half of what someone working full-time on minimum wage makes in BC. And the minimum wage is already far below Vancouver's living wage, the amount expert economists say you need to make to just barely afford a dignified life, even without the added costs of disability. But Madeline doesn't work, some would say, so why should she get any money? There's a common narrative out there about people receiving various forms of government assistance not really deserving it. I saw in the comments on the news stories I wrote about Madeline last year, get a job, stop leeching off taxpayers. Why should I have to pay for your problems?
There's this idea that PWD assistance is like trips to Aruba money.
It's literally impossible for many people with chronic illness or disability to work, and they face extreme stigma when they do try to find jobs. And working could actually kill Madeline. Instead, she's found a way to make connections, contribute, and be a part of society through volunteer work, which is far less demanding and stressful, and far more accommodating than the majority of employers. She used to be able to meet with other volunteers and be outside. Now she does most of the organization from a phone or computer.
All the nudging and the liaising and getting different parts of the various organizations to talk to each other and making sure you understand the protocols and making sure everybody's clear about the protocols. And I did it all from bed, but it was still a lot of work. I'm proud of it. But I know people don't value it because they don't see me out in the world. But I know I'm valuable. And we're supposed to live in a country where a person's value is that they're human, you know? Because otherwise, why aren't we just killing people? Well, if it's not okay to kill them, it's not okay to deprive them medically and let them suffer unimaginably and die.
Isolation is the number one reason ME patients give for suicidality and depression. Volunteering does cost Madeline some energy, but it also gives her purpose. And she's incredibly valuable. Advocates say upwards of 80% of important community care tasks in Canada are done by unpaid volunteers. Madeline certainly isn't alone in feeling dehumanized by a system that values someone's economic production over all else. People with disabilities, PWD, are often harmed by this rhetoric.
That there is this ingrained bias in society. I've given this a lot of thought. That if you give PWD money, it's like putting it in a hole in the ground. And it isn't. It's an economic stimulus.
Just existing costs more if you're disabled. That should be obvious, and yet disabled people are expected to live on much less than almost everyone else. In the early days of the pandemic, the federal government started giving out-of-work Canadians $2,000 a month, while Madeline continued to receive far less. Disability and poverty go hand in hand. According to Statistics Canada, a quarter of people with a disability are considered low income. Chronically poor people experience higher rates of malnutrition, inadequate access to public health services like vaccinations. They face poor living conditions and environmental exposures in unsafe working environments that can lead to chronic health conditions. The poor who become disabled are likely to descend further into poverty and in turn further into disability. Alit Mansky is an author, community organizer, and social entrepreneur who's been a disability activist since his daughter Liz was born with Down syndrome. He says the structures and politics that legislate disabled people into poverty are built on the dehumanizing beliefs about them.
I think the biggest challenge is cultural. Is throughout history, groups have been marginalized and treated as non-persons, as subhuman, as objects rather than subjects, as people without any agency.
Al spends most of his time lobbying the Canadian government for a livable basic income for disabled people. It's difficult, at times demoralizing work. The pace of change is slow, held back by generations of institutional inertia.
The double whammy for people with disabilities is that they're being supported. The income support comes through a welfare system that goes back to the Elizabethan times, to the Elizabethan poor laws. It's still, those assumptions are still in our welfare system that you're a cheat. You should only be on for a short period of time. If we're going to give you anything, you must report in, etc.
But he's not a cynic. He believes that pushing for incremental change from within the system is the best way to make things better. But not everyone takes that approach, especially self-advocates who believe the government has been dragging its feet long enough and more direct approaches and demands are required. Al was a driving force behind BC establishing the first disability savings plan in the country, which allowed people on assistance to save some money for the first time. And he believes raising the current assistant rates and improving the lives of people like Madeline will come from tireless advocacy. He has the ear of high-ranking bureaucrats, politicians, and decision-makers across the country, but he also tries to bring voices like Madeline's to those ears. Not just voices like Madeline's, though, her actual voice. Fury, humor, singing and all. In 2020, Al was asked by the Federal Minister of Disability to co-chair the Canadian COVID-19 Advisory Board on Disability. And in his short tenure in that role, before he stepped down to make space for someone with a disability to fill the chair, Madeline emailed him her story, not really expecting a response.
And so I answered her, and it was always kind of cheerful and kind of desperate in a sense of her situation was horrible. The economic challenges that she was facing, as well as the pain and her prospects for life. And so I gradually just in touch. And I think after a while, she started to trust me a little bit. I think she talked to a bunch of people to see if I was somebody she could. I don't blame her. And then I'd like to say that we began our friendship.
As a high-level advocate, Al had the connections needed to get Madeline a meeting with BC's Minister for Social Development and Poverty Reduction. She was nervous leading up to the meeting and wasn't sure if she should be advocating for herself or on behalf of everyone with ME/CFS and long-haul COVID. But the meeting seemed to go well. She ended up singing a bit from The Sound of Music, showing the politicians and bureaucrats a little piece of herself in hopes it might help humanize her story. The minister, Nicholas Simmons, is a musician too. He seemed to appreciate the song.
And I even had a bureaucrat say this to me, that by the time people are in your condition, when they talk to us, they're just yelling. And it's really hard to understand what's going on if you've got somebody yelling at you.
Of course, people with disabilities are yelling. They're dying in poverty and nothing has changed in decades. Politicians should not be dismissing people just because they're emotional. But because of Madeline's profound ability to remain calm and kind, it seemed like, by all accounts, the meeting went well.
I would say that was a really receptive environment. And Madeline was incredible. It was a virtuoso performance in terms of helping people understand what it means to live with post-viral syndrome. And now we're waiting for the call back saying that the system now has a mandate to develop a policy that will lead to an increase in budget.
That meeting was in April, just 2 months ago. Team Madeline, including Al and Liza, was optimistic. The Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction said it was ready to draft something that would get Madeline more money for those Myers cocktail injections. It just needed the support and approval of the Ministry of Health. By May, nothing had changed, and Al sent this email to the group on May 20th. Hi team, I have some disappointing news. I'm sorry to report there is no movement on the part of the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction. The roadblock appears to be health. They need to commit. Social development won't do it on their own. I wish this was easier. I consider it a momentary setback. I'm pretty used to securing change in these conditions, and I look forward to getting mobilized.
It's a policy gap. It's their language. It's a policy gap. And so they need a policy in health that acknowledges the validity of naturopathic remedies and treatments. The science is there, works for other classes of people. And so that became the next stage, was to then problem solve. How do we get a policy change? That requires a blessing from a politician.
And after all of this advocacy, Liza, who started Madeline's GoFundMe, is flabbergasted by the government's lack of a response.
Because we're noticing that so many people are having the COVID symptoms linger. Nobody quite knows what to do. And it feels like we just don't have anything in place from a provincial government level to cope with this situation. I mean, we've talked with ministers, we've talked with health professionals, we've talked with the people from the university, from UBC, we've talked with associations, we've got advocates working on her behalf, and I'm in shock every time we have these conversations that the solution is so easy, and yet we can't come to it. Right? We can't offer her the solution, which is, she just basically needs to have enough money to be able to get treatment. Like, it's not rocket science.
So Madeline is still waiting for this supposed policy change, caught in a bureaucratic pinball machine.
It's this horrible game of pass the potato between the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction and the Ministry of Health.
We have asked to speak with the Minister for Social Development and Poverty Reduction, Nicholas Simmons, because his ministry runs everything associated with disability payments and coverage. He declined. His communications team sent us a paper-thin response to serious questions and denied knowing anything about any policy being drafted or shared with the Ministry of Health. BC's Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, also declined to speak with us, but staff did respond to all 8 of our prepared questions. The Ministry of Health pointed us to the Complex Care Incentive Program, which they say is available to compensate physicians to care for patients with eligible complex conditions, including ME, who require assistance with meal preparation, transportation, and transfers. Madeline has been begging for this kind of help, including directly to Minister Simmons, for over a year, and she's been told no. The Health Ministry also pointed us to 4 new post-COVID recovery clinics in the Greater Vancouver area and said there are provincial health groups teaching physicians how to care for long COVID patients. They said there are, quote, lessons to be learned from ME/CFS patients. But what is being done to help those who already have ME/CFS from causes other than COVID-19? As far as Madeline is concerned, nothing. Mild and moderate ME/CFS patients from across the province are being sent to one place in Vancouver, the Complex Chronic Diseases Program at the BC Women's and Children's Hospital, which was launched in 2013. I've now spoken with 4 patients or family members of patients who were referred to the program over the last few years. They all say they were given little as far as treatment options, other than advice to stay within their energy windows in order to avoid overexerting themselves. It's called self-management, and it's the opposite of being told to push through and exercise with ME/CFS, but still, it offers no real relief. Matt, the former ICU nurse from Vancouver Island we told you about earlier, was referred to the program 6 months into his illness and was warned it would be a long wait.
We then got a call after 30 months of being on the wait list for an appointment. So my understanding is that for the past number of years, their wait list has been between 28 and 36 months for patient intake.
For more than 2 years, Matt's health got worse and worse despite trying vitamins, supplements, diets, and having a supportive GP.
By the end of going through all those specialists, we had rented a wheelchair for him to get to the appointments from the car to the room.
By the time his appointment was up, COVID had hit Canada and the CCDP started taking virtual appointments. Without that option, Matt, like so many extreme ME patients, would never have seen the doctor at all because he would not have been able to physically make the long trip to Vancouver and back. As it was, Matt had deteriorated so much that his wife Sue had to take the call. There was no way for doctors to speak with him. He was unable to speak at all. Sue had to explain that no, splitting the call between 2 45-minute sessions wouldn't make a difference.
So that was hard for me to have to educate that one landing place in the healthcare system that I thought would really get us. That was hard.
The model of care at the CCDP is that patients participate in group education for self-management. It's not a lot of help, if any, for patients like Matt. And in the end, he and Sue were told to try back later.
The intake we had was a physician consultation, and it was very thorough. It confirmed the diagnosis that we had had from prior. It confirmed what we had currently been enacting with our GP was appropriate and that there wasn't much more. And they had offered that we could revisit this intake process in 6 months to see if he would be well enough to continue on. And of course, with no other medical intervention in 6 months, he was not okay to go on. And so we never engaged in any of the other courses or offerings with the program. And that has since left us with no care plan, no prognosis for someone who's incredibly ill.
The experts who work at the CCDP were not allowed to speak with us, nor were their managers. The communications department in charge of who comments on these stories says they won't comment on cases of individual patients. But we asked to speak broadly about ME and long COVID, and they still said they couldn't possibly comment as they weren't sure how we might frame the story. So Matt is still in bed, and Sue is still waiting for the man she loves to come back to life.
He's an incredible spouse and parent and partner. He's a great neighbor and coworker and all of those things. It's just such a loss. Our friends miss him, and it's challenging to witness how much he is suffering.
Madeline has also been to the Complex Chronic Diseases Program. She too was told it's critical to stay within her energy window. They recommended hiring help for basic tasks like cleaning her apartment. But of course she can't afford that. Remember that tape we played you in episode 2 when Madeline was cleaning her apartment before a fire alarm inspection?
Like, you do not understand that, you know, with the tininess of the energy window that I'm looking at, that the measure of even small activities costing the last of whatever dregs of energy I have, or causing me to borrow energy from the next day. And so then I'm ending up in a measure of brutal fatigue and pain that just I can't find meaning in. I can't impose, because this is how I'm surviving. I'm imposing purpose. Not that my quality of life is worth it, but that I impose quality of life upon it. So
You know, it's like, yeah, I could take a little piece of the mess, maybe, but then maybe I don't see anybody all week because I don't have the energy to do a volunteer thing or go visit with a friend. And visit with a friend is like walk 100 feet down to the beach and have a little visit. This is not like go to like a dance rave or something. Oh. So, you know, like these are the oh crap. These are the some of the limits that I'm up against. Oh crap. So it's really not the big fun. It's also, if you know that little piece of whatever, like amps your pain up like what you're hearing right now. It's not really a thing you want to deliberately put yourself through if you can kind of avoid it at all. So yeah, that's a very able thinking. Is why the CCDP recommended like having help, because this is not a good expenditure of energy. This is a high, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap, and high expenditure of pain, and not really the best way to manage my illness.
The province doesn't provide a cleaner. It doesn't even provide her the resources to purchase a sticky mat that could prevent her from falling in the shower.
So I slip, I break my hip. I become bedridden. The minute you become bedridden, are you looking at constant home care? Are you looking at putting me in a care home? The costs on these are between $50,000 and $100,000 a year. What did the sticky mat cost? $20.
This is the illogical logic behind all of this. So here we are. That horrible deadline for assisted death or stopping treatments is fast approaching, and Madeline is still poor, sick, and now losing hope.
Every single second of every single day, the death clock ticks in my ear, and it's soul destroying, you know, and I don't know what to do.
The province doesn't seem like it's in any hurry to make changes for disability income or health policy. Madeline's GoFundMe stalled months ago. She's allowed to die by assisted death in July, but she's in the driver's seat. If she can or wants to, at any moment she can walk away from or delay that decision. But she fears if she waits too long, she'll be trapped in her body and unable to speak, eat, move, or even give her final consent for the administration of death. Team Madeline is still hard at work, though. They haven't given up hope, and I don't want her to die.
I don't like the fact that she's begun the process medically indicted. It's a kind of a weird thing to say, but I respect it. Who am I to say that this level of pain, to be unable to get up in the middle of the night to go pee without it feeling like you've just put both your hands in a fire, that level of pain. So who am I to say that carry on? It's profound, undeniable that we need to change this, and we need to change it immediately.
In episode 4 of I Am Madeline, we're going to look medically assisted death right in the eye. We'll talk about Madeline's case and those of other ME patients. We'll look at the touchy ethics that have fueled public debate in Canada for years. You can find that beautiful photo of Madeline and a link to her GoFundMe on our Twitter page at IamMadelinePod. Transcripts from this episode and others can be found at IamMadeline.com. Thanks to Lee Rosevear for his beautiful musical compositions, and a special thanks to our newest Patreon supporters, Eleanor, Tori, Dustin, Joseph, Guillaume, and Roz. We posted our first bonus episode last week at patreon.com/umbrellapodcasting. Our second bonus episode will be an extended interview with Dr. Hélène Moreau, and it will be up soon. All you have to do to hear those is sign up to support the show. I Am Madeline is produced on the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I Am Madeline is co-produced by Kelvin Gawley and me, Ash Kelly. Thanks for listening.